The first thing I signed that night was not surrender. It was the end of their 6-month performance. 38 people sat around the Bellamy dining room table, smiling like they had all been invited to watch a man finally learn his place. The house looked perfect from the outside. White brick, black shutters, 2 acres of trimmed Kentucky bluegrass glowing under copper landscape lights. The kind of place where every window seemed designed to tell neighbors you had made it. Inside, the air smelled like roast beef, expensive candles, and old money pretending it had never been new. Crystal glasses lined the table. Silver forks caught the chandelier light. At the far end, Richard Bellamy stood with one hand resting on the back of his wife's chair, proud as a judge, cold as a bank vault. My wife, Claire, sat beside me in a cream dress she had bought for the occasion, her smile careful, polished, practiced. She had worn that smile in church, in Christmas photos, at charity dinners, and during every conversation where she needed people to believe she was the reasonable one. That night, she wore it for an audience. I could feel her family watching me, her brothers near the fireplace, her cousins whispering by the bar cart, her mother pretending to adjust napkins while studying my face. And Evan Parker, the family attorney, stood near the sideboard with a glass of iced tea he had barely touched, trying to look casual and failing. The folder was already on the table when dessert plates were cleared. Tan, legal-sized, clean edges, thick enough to carry a life inside it. Richard tapped it twice with his finger, not hard, just enough to make the room notice. Conversations thinned. Laughter faded. Even the ice in someone's glass seemed too loud. Claire leaned close enough for her perfume to reach me and whispered, "Don't embarrass me tonight, Nathan. Just sign. Just sign." 2 words people use when they have already decided your future belongs to them. I looked down at the folder, then at the pen beside it. Heavy black barrel. Gold clip. Richard's pen, of course. Men like Richard always believe the final word should come from something with their initials engraved on it. He cleared his throat and smiled at the table. Tonight, Nathan is going to do the right thing for this family. A few heads nodded. Someone murmured, "Good." Claire placed her hand on my wrist, gentle enough for the room, firm enough for me. That was the moment they expected me to break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, the way they believed men like me broke when surrounded by polished shoes, family money, and the threat of public shame. I picked up the pen. Claire exhaled. Richard's smile widened by half an inch. Evan looked down at his shoes. That was how I knew he understood something was wrong before anyone else did. The paper slid toward me. The chandelier hummed softly above us. My name waited at the bottom line like a grave already dug. I signed slowly. Nathan Whitaker. Every letter clean. Every stroke steady. When I finished, the room released a breath it had been holding for 6 months. Claire's fingers loosened on my wrist. Richard reached for the folder. I kept my hand on it. Then I looked up at all 38 faces and said, "That's the first honest signature in this room tonight." The silence that followed did not fall. It arrived. Heavy. Immediate. Like every locked door in that house had just closed at once. 6 months earlier, I learned that betrayal does not always sound like a confession. Sometimes it sounds like your wife laughing softly in the garage when she thinks the house is asleep. It was a Thursday night in late October, cold enough for frost to silver the mailbox by morning, and I had come home later than usual from a job site outside Lexington. My boots were muddy, my jacket smelled like sawdust and concrete dust, and all I wanted was a shower and 10 quiet minutes at the kitchen counter with whatever leftovers were still in the refrigerator. The house was dark except for the thin strip of light under the garage door. I almost called out to Claire. I almost stepped in like any husband would. Then I heard my name. Not the way she said it at dinner parties. Not warm, not polished. Smaller, sharper, like a file sliding across metal. "Nathan is too proud to make a scene in front of my family," she said. I stopped with one hand on the doorknob. The air changed. It was still the same hallway, same framed wedding photo, same runner rug Claire had ordered from some store in Nashville. But suddenly the whole house felt staged. I could hear another voice through the door. Evan Parker. Smooth, careful, the kind of man who used complete sentences even when he was lying. He said, "Then the anniversary party is the cleanest place to do it. Witnesses make it difficult for him to claim pressure later." My hand tightened around my keys. They pressed into my palm hard enough to leave half-moon marks. Claire gave a little laugh. "He will sign if everyone is watching him. He hates being embarrassed." There it was. Not anger. Not heartbreak. A plan. I stood in that hallway while the furnace clicked on and warm air moved through the vents like nothing in my life had shifted. I remember staring at our wedding picture on the wall. Claire in white. Me in a gray suit that did not fit quite right because I had spent the money on the honeymoon instead of tailoring. 12 years earlier, she had looked at me like I was safety. That night, behind a garage door, she talked about me like I was an obstacle with predictable habits. Evan asked if Richard was comfortable taking the lead. Claire said her father had been waiting years for me to stop pretending I belonged. Those words landed quietly. That was the part that scared me. No explosion in my chest. No urge to throw open the door. Just a calm, cold space opening behind my ribs. The kind of calm a man feels when he finally understands the weather is not changing. The storm is already here. I backed away from the garage without making a sound. I did not confront her. I did not ask who wrote the papers. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing pain while it was still fresh. I walked upstairs, washed the dust from my hands, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. 42 years old. Gray at the temples. Tired eyes. A man they thought they could corner with a dining room full of relatives and one expensive pen. Downstairs, Claire came in 10 minutes later and kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. Long day, she asked. I looked at her. Reflection in the dark kitchen window, and said, long enough. That night, after she fell asleep, I went to my home office, opened a new folder on my laptop, and named it Claire Pattern. Then I wrote the date. October 17th. First documented conversation. I did not know yet how deep it went. I only knew one thing. If they wanted 6 months to build a trap around me, I was going to use every single day to build one underneath them. People like the Bellamys never called me poor. That would have been too honest. They used cleaner words, softer words, words wrapped in linen napkins and polite smiles. Practical, simple, blue-collar, dependable. The kind of man you call when a pipe leaks, not the kind of man you introduce with pride at a country club dinner. I had heard it for 12 years, usually from across rooms where they thought music and laughter could cover contempt. Nathan is good with his hands. Nathan does not need much. Nathan is not complicated. They said it like compliments. They meant it like measurements. I owned a small construction company with 14 employees, 2 flatbed trucks, a rented office off New Circle Road, and enough debt on paper to make rich men underestimate me. We built additions, repaired foundations, framed houses, poured driveways, fixed storm damage, and cleaned up other people's emergencies before sunrise. My morning started at 5:15 with black coffee in a travel mug and ended with sawdust in my hair, invoices on the passenger seat, and a lower back that reminded me I was not 25 anymore. I was not flashy. I did not play golf with bankers. I did not talk about market trends over bourbon. But every Friday, my crew got paid before I did. Every client got a return call. Every contract had my name on it because I believed a man's signature should weigh something. Claire used to love that about me. At least, I thought she did. When we first met at a church fundraiser in Frankfurt, she said she liked that I seemed steady. She said most men in her world talked too much and stood for too little. Back then, she would ride with me to job sites in jeans and sunglasses, holding gas station coffee like it was something special. She laughed when mud got on her boots. She kissed me in the cab of my truck while rain hammered the windshield and told me I made her feel safe. Safe. That word can fool a man for years. Because somewhere along the way, safe became ordinary. Ordinary became embarrassing. Embarrassing became useful only when bills needed paying and shelves needed fixing. The change did not happen all at once. It came in small, polished cuts. Claire stopped walking beside me at her father's events and started arriving 10 minutes before me. She corrected my grammar in front of her cousins with a smile soft enough to look playful. She bought me sport coats I never asked for, then sighed when they did not sit on my shoulders like Evan Parker's tailored suits. At Christmas, Richard gave me a leather tool belt from a boutique store in Louisville and said, "For a man who knows his lane." Everyone laughed. I did too. That is what men like me are trained to do. Keep the peace. Swallow the insult. Tell yourself it is not worth ruining the evening. But the body keeps records even when the mouth stays quiet. I remembered every look Claire did not defend me from. Every time her hand slipped out of mine when someone important walked over. Every dinner where I was seated near the end of the table, close enough to belong, far enough not to matter. By the time I heard her in the garage with Evan, I understood something I should have seen years earlier. They did not think I was weak because I had failed. They thought I was weak because I had been patient. And patience, in the wrong room, looks like permission. By the first week of November, I stopped listening for apologies and started listening for structure. That is the thing most people miss when they are hurt. They chase emotion. They ask why. They beg for the missing piece that will make cruelty make sense. I did not. I had spent half my life reading blueprints, and a bad plan has a shape if you know where to look. Claire's shape started showing up everywhere. A locked drawer in the kitchen desk that had never been locked before. A new password on the home office computer. A sudden interest in bank statements she had ignored for a decade. Questions that sounded casual until you line them up. How much equity is really in the house? Is your company worth anything without you? Did you ever put my name on the equipment loans? Each question was a nail. Alone, harmless. Together, framing. I answered just enough to seem tired, not suspicious. That became my first rule. Do not act smarter than they believe you are. On November 9th, Claire told me she was meeting her mother for lunch in Lexington. She wore pearl earrings, a navy coat, and the calm face she used when she had already rehearsed the lie. 20 minutes after she left, a notification came through from our shared toll account. Her car had crossed the bridge toward Louisville, not Lexington. I did not call. I did not text. I opened the Claire pattern folder and made a note. 2 hours later, she came home with a shopping bag from a boutique near her mother's neighborhood. Good cover, clean edges, almost professional, but almost is where the truth lives. That night, when she went upstairs, I checked the receipt she left in the recycling bin. The purchase had been made 3 days earlier. Small things, quiet things, the kind of things no one notices when they are busy trying not to feel foolish. I noticed. A week later, Richard invited me to lunch at his club, which should have been my second warning because Richard Bellamy had never once wanted to eat with me unless there were witnesses and a bill he could pay loudly. He sat across from me in a dining room full of dark wood and framed horse racing photographs, wearing a gray blazer and the expression of a man preparing to be generous with someone else's life. He talked about family unity. He talked about responsibility. He talked about Claire being under strain. Then he said, "Sometimes a man proves his character by stepping aside from what he cannot manage." I looked at the water glass between us and watched a slice of lemon turn slowly near the ice. "What exactly do you think I cannot manage, Richard?" He smiled. Complexity. There it was again. The linen napkin version of stupid. He slid nothing across the table that day. No paper. No pen. Just pressure disguised as advice. But when he stood to leave, I saw Evan Parker by the front window, pretending to read a message on his phone. Richard did not look at him. Evan did not look at Richard. That was how I knew they had met before I arrived. That evening, I added another entry. Richard lunch. Evan present. Coordinated pressure likely. The folder grew slowly after that. Not with drama. With patterns. Claire began telling friends I was stressed. Then difficult. Then unpredictable. Nothing specific. Specifics can be challenged. Fog is harder to fight. She laid fog around me in careful little clouds, so that when the party came and the folder appeared, everyone would already believe the weather was my fault. By Thanksgiving, I understood the plan well enough to respect how patient it was. They were not trying to defeat me in one night. They were trying to prepare a room where my defeat would look reasonable. By December, I had stopped thinking like a husband trying to save a marriage and started thinking like a builder trying to prove the foundation had been sabotaged. Emotion was noise. Documentation was structure. I found Daniel Brooks through a retired judge who still owed my company a favor for fixing water damage in his basement after a February freeze. Daniel's office was on the third floor of an old brick building downtown, above a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. He did not have Richard's country club polish or Evan's soft courtroom voice. He had gray hair, reading glasses, and the stillness of a man who did not need to perform intelligence because he had already survived enough fools. I sat across from him with a legal pad full of dates, toll records, receipts, bank notices, and notes from conversations I wished I had never heard. He listened for 40 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Do you want revenge or do you want protection?" That question found the last weak place in me. Revenge sounded honest. Protection sounded boring. But boring is what keeps a man from losing his house because someone else learned how to cry in public. I told him I wanted protection. Daniel nodded once. "Then we do this. Clean." No threats. No theatrics. No illegal recordings. No guessing. We build a file so boring and so precise that nobody can argue with it. That became the second rule. Boring wins. From that day forward, I kept everything lawful, time-stamped, and duplicated. Bank statements went into one folder. Property records into another. Text messages were preserved with dates visible. Emails were printed, scanned, and backed up. I photographed envelopes before opening them. I saved call logs without recording conversations where the law did not allow it. I moved copies to an encrypted drive locked in a metal cabinet at my office, then sent duplicates to Daniel. 3 copies. 3 deadbolts. Every Friday morning before heading to a job site, I updated the file. It became a ritual. Coffee at 5:15. Boots by 5:40. Evidence by 6. Then concrete, lumber, inspections, payroll, and the ordinary labor of keeping 14 families fed. Claire never noticed, because people rarely notice discipline when they are looking for weakness. She saw my dirty jacket on the chair and thought tired. She saw me quiet at dinner and thought defeated. She saw me nod while Richard spoke and thought trained. Good. Let them read the wrong blueprint. In January, Daniel found the first crack that mattered. The draft agreement Evan had sent to our home printer under the harmless title family asset summary contained language that would have moved my ownership interest in the house into a trust controlled by Claire and her father. Not immediately. That would have been too obvious. It would happen through a sequence of acknowledgments, waivers, and temporary protections written in soft legal language. Daniel circled one paragraph in red and slid it across his desk. "This is not a marital agreement," he said. "This is a funnel." My throat went dry, but my hands stayed still. A funnel. That was exactly what it was. Wide at the top, friendly at the entrance, narrow at the end. Designed so by the time I realized where I was going, gravity would do the rest. In February, Claire transferred $12,000 from our joint savings into an account labeled Bellamy Family Consulting. She told me it was for her mother's medical bills. Her mother was in Palm Beach posting beach photos in white linen pants. I saved the transfer. In March, Richard sent me an email about simplifying matters before the anniversary celebration. I saved that too. By April, Daniel had prepared 3 documents of our own. A formal refusal of any agreement signed under public pressure, a petition to preserve marital assets, and an affidavit laying out 6 months of coordinated financial manipulation. The trap was no longer just theirs. It had a floor now, and they were still dancing on it. By the morning of the party, the house on Ashford Pike looked less like a home and more like a stage waiting for its final act. Claire had been moving through our bedroom since 7 o'clock, choosing earrings, rejecting shoes, smoothing the cream dress across her hips with the focus of someone preparing for cameras that were not there. I stood at the bathroom sink shaving, watching her reflection pass behind me in short, controlled movements. She barely looked at me. That was new and not new at all. "Please wear the navy suit," she said. "And do not bring up work tonight." I rinsed the razor under warm water. "What should I bring up?" She paused with one pearl earring halfway to her ear. "Just be pleasant, Nathan." Pleasant. That word followed me all day like a collar. At 10, I drove to my office and met Daniel Brooks in the gravel lot behind the building. The sky was a flat Kentucky gray, low clouds, wet pavement, a spring wind pushing loose receipts against the curb. Daniel handed me a slim black folder through the driver's window. No speech. No drama. Just paper, clean and heavy. "Everything is in order," he said. "You understand what happens if they present their document in front of witnesses." I nodded. "I let them." "You do not argue." "I know." "You do not accuse anyone at the table." "I know." He studied me for a second, his eyes steady behind his glasses. "They are counting on your pride to do the talking. Let your preparation speak instead." I put the folder under the seat of my truck like it was nothing. Like it was not 6 months of oxygen sealed in black cardboard. At 4:30, Claire and I pulled into her parents' driveway. The Bellamy house glowed at the top of the hill, white brick washed in gold light, rows of cars curving along the drive like a dealership for people who never worried about payments. Inside, the party had already warmed itself into confidence. Laughter from the dining room. Ice against glass. Her mother's perfume hanging near the entry like a warning. Richard greeted me with both hands on my shoulders, too friendly, too public. "There he is," he said loudly. "The man of the hour." A few people turned. A few smiled. Claire squeezed my arm hard enough to remind me of my role. I smiled back. Not wide. Not false. Just enough. Evan Parker stood near the bar cart in a charcoal suit, speaking to one of Claire's cousins about bourbon he was not drinking. When he saw me, his mouth moved into something close to a smile and stopped halfway. Good. The first crack of the evening. Dinner stretched for 90 minutes. Toasts to Richard and Margaret's 40 years. Stories about lake trips, old business deals, family loyalty, sacrifice, legacy. Words that sounded noble until you knew who was sharpening them. I ate the roast beef. I passed the potatoes. I laughed once when Claire's brother made a joke about my truck being the only honest vehicle in the driveway. Everyone laughed harder than the joke deserved. That was how these rooms worked. They did not need to push you. They only needed everyone to lean the same direction. After dessert, Richard stood. His chair scraped against the hardwood, and the room settled almost immediately. Too fast. Rehearsed. He lifted his glass and talked about trust, family, responsibility, the importance of doing difficult things before they became painful things. Claire lowered her eyes at the perfect moment. Evan set his untouched drink on the sideboard. Margaret reached beneath her chair and pulled out the tan legal folder. There it was. 6 months of fog becoming paper. Richard laid it in front of me with the gentle confidence of a man placing a leash on a table. Nathan, he said, warm enough for witnesses, cold enough for me. We all believe tonight can be a turning point. 38 faces turned toward me. Claire leaned in and whispered, just sign. I reached into my jacket, not for Richard's pen, but for mine. I reached into my jacket, not for Richard's pen, but for mine, and the smallest change in the room told me everything. Evan saw it first. His eyes dropped to my hand, then to the folder, then back to my face, and for one clean second the mask slipped. Not fear. Recognition. A lawyer knows when a man refuses the prop he was handed. Richard still smiled because men like Richard never believe a room can turn against them while they are standing in the center of it. Claire's fingers tightened around my forearm. Nathan, she whispered, and this time my name had a warning inside it. I opened the tan folder slowly. The top page was exactly what Daniel said it would be. Soft language, careful margins, friendly poison. Acknowledgement of family contributions. Temporary asset protection. Voluntary restructuring. Phrases built to sound harmless to 38 relatives who did not understand that a velvet rope can still be a noose if someone pulls it tight enough. I read the first paragraph. Then the second. Nobody spoke. That was the beautiful part. For 6 months they had used silence as a weapon against me, and now silence had turned around and chosen my side. Richard cleared his throat. It is standard paperwork, Nathan. I looked at Evan. Is it? Evan's jaw flexed once. He said nothing. Claire leaned closer, her perfume sharp in the warm room. Please do not make this ugly. I almost smiled at that. Ugly had started long before the folder reached the table. Ugly was toll records and fake lunches. Ugly was $12,000 leaving a joint account under a family label. Ugly was a wife teaching people to doubt her husband before she ever asked him to sign away his ground. I slid Richard's document aside and pulled the slim black folder from inside my jacket. The sound it made on the table was soft. Final. Claire looked at it as if paper had suddenly learned to breathe. What is that? She asked. I uncapped my pen. The document I am willing to sign in front of your family. Richard's smile disappeared so slowly it looked like bad lighting. That is not what we discussed. No, I said. It is what you made necessary. I opened the black folder to the signature page Daniel had prepared. Formal refusal under public pressure. Notice of preservation of marital assets. Affidavit of documented coercion and coordinated financial manipulation. Clean words. Boring words. Winning words. Claire stood so quickly her chair bumped the rug behind her. Nathan, stop. I signed. Not fast. Not angry. I gave each letter the respect a signature deserves. Nathan Whitaker. When the pen lifted from the page, Richard reached across the table. I placed my palm on the folder before he touched it. Do not. One word. Not loud. It landed anyway. At that exact moment, the front doorbell rang. Once. Clear as a church bell. Margaret flinched. Evan closed his eyes for half a second, and that was when I knew he understood the evening had moved beyond family theater. Claire turned toward the hallway. Who was that? I kept my eyes on Richard. My attorney. Daniel Brooks stepped into the dining room wearing a dark overcoat still dotted with rain, followed by a mobile notary carrying a leather case. No one at that table knew what to do with a calm professional entering a room built for emotional pressure. Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not introduce drama. He simply removed 3 copies from his briefcase and said, "Mr. Whitaker has signed a sworn statement confirming that he refuses any agreement presented tonight under social or familial pressure. Copies are available for Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Bellamy, and Mr. Parker." Evan's face lost its color first, then Claire's, then Richard's. The order mattered. The guilty always know their names before they are spoken. Daniel placed the copies on the table with the calm precision of a man setting down receipts after the fire had already started. 1 for Claire, 1 for Richard, 1 for Evan Parker, whose hand remained frozen around his untouched glass of iced tea. Nobody reached for them at first. That was the strange thing about truth when it enters a room too late. Everyone sees it, but no one wants to be the first to admit it has arrived. Richard recovered. Before the others, or tried to. He gave a short laugh, thin and expensive. "This is unnecessary theater." Daniel looked at him over the rim of his glasses. "No, Mr. Bellamy. Theater was presenting a legally significant agreement at a family celebration with 38 relatives watching." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Someone near the fireplace whispered Claire's name, and for the first time all night, it did not sound admiring. Claire picked up her copy with both hands. I watched her eyes move across the first page, then slow on the second. She was looking for emotion and finding dates. October 17th, November 9th, November 14th, December 3rd, February 12th, March 26th. 6 months reduced to lines no smile could soften. Daniel did not accuse her of anything. He did something worse. He organized her. He opened his briefcase and removed a second packet, thicker than the first. "Mr. Whitaker has also filed a petition requesting preservation of marital assets pending review. That includes transfers made from joint accounts, proposed changes to property ownership, and communications related to the agreement presented tonight." Evan finally spoke. "You cannot possibly have enough basis for that." His voice tried for professional and landed near afraid. Daniel turned 1 page. "You received a draft from Mrs. Whitaker on January 8th with revisions to Section 4, subsection C, including the phrase temporary control until dissolution. You replied at 6:42 in the evening that the language should remain broad enough for Nathan not to notice." The dining room went still in a new way. Not shocked. Educated. Evan's lips parted, then closed. Claire stared at him like betrayal had become contagious. Richard's wife lowered herself into her chair as if her knees had forgotten the job. "I did not look victorious. I did not feel victorious. Victory is louder in people's imagination than it is in real life. In real life, it tastes like cold coffee and 6 months of sleeping beside someone who is measuring the walls around you." Daniel continued. $12,000 moved to Bellamy Family Consulting, while Claire described it to me as medical support. A toll record placing her car in Louisville during the claimed Lexington lunch. 3 separate messages from Richard urging that I be surrounded by trusted family when the documents were introduced. Claire's text to Evan that said, "He will sign if everyone is watching. He cannot handle looking small." That line did the most damage. Not because it was illegal, because it was honest. Her brothers looked at me then, really looked, maybe for the first time in 12 years. Not at the boots, or the suit that never quite belonged, or the man who fixed things and stayed quiet. At me. Claire's face changed slowly, the polished mask loosening at the edges. "You were collecting things against me," she said. I turned to her. "No, I was giving you time to stop." That answer hit harder than anger would have. I could see it. Anger gives people something to fight. Calm gives them a mirror. Richard pointed at Daniel's packet. "Private family matters do not belong in legal filings." Daniel closed the folder. "Then private family members should not attempt public legal pressure." Somewhere at the table, a fork slipped from a plate and tapped porcelain once. Small sound. Big room. Claire sat down as if the air had grown heavier around her. Evan finally picked up his copy, but his hands were not as steady as they had been at the beginning of the night. He knew what a bar complaint looked like before it was filed. Richard knew what a paper trail looked like when it stopped being negotiable. And Claire knew, maybe only then, that for 6 months she had not been watching a weak man drift toward surrender. She had been standing on a floor he built under every lie she told. For a while, nobody moved. The Bellamy dining room, which had been built for announcements and polished laughter, held a silence too heavy for its chandelier. Claire sat with Daniel's packet in front of her, one hand resting on the edge of the table as if the wood could still give her balance. Richard stood at the head of the table with his mouth slightly open, not speechless because he had nothing to say, but because every sentence he trusted had suddenly become dangerous. Evan Parker looked toward the hallway twice. He wanted distance. Men who help build pressure rarely enjoy standing inside it when the walls start showing their seams. Daniel gathered his copies and gave me a small nod. Not celebration. Confirmation. The legal work would continue Monday morning in offices with fluorescent lights, stamped forms, and people who cared more about timelines than family legends. That was where this belonged now. Not in a dining room. Not under a chandelier. Not between dessert plates and whispered judgment. Claire finally stood and followed me as I stepped away from the table. Her heels clicked behind me across the foyer marble, faster than usual, less certain. "Nathan," she said, softer now. The room behind us stayed quiet enough to hear every word. I opened the front door and cool spring air moved into the house, carrying the smell of wet grass and rain on brick. "Not here," I said. Outside, the driveway curved under soft landscape lights. The same driveway where 6 months earlier I would have parked carefully, checked my shirt cuffs, and told myself to endure one more Bellamy evening for the sake of peace. My truck sat near the end of the line, dark blue, a little dusty, honest in a row of polished German cars. Claire stopped 3 feet behind me. "You set me up," she said. There it was. Not "I am sorry." Not "I was wrong." Not "what did I do to you." Just an accusation wearing the clothes of injury. I turned around slowly. Her face looked different without the dining room behind it. Smaller. Human. The cream dress, the pearls, the perfect hair, none of it could soften what 6 months of paper had made clear. "No, Claire," I said. "I gave you 6 months to stop." Her eyes shone, but I had learned that tears could arrive for many reasons. Regret, fear, embarrassment, loss of control. Only one of those meant accountability, and she had not found that one yet. She folded her arms against the cold. "My father pushed too hard." Evan made it sound simple. I was scared. I nodded once, because maybe part of that was true. Maybe people rarely become cruel all at once. Maybe they borrow courage from the wrong room and call it survival. But truth does not become less true because fear helped write it. "You used every day," I said. "Every single one." Behind her, Richard appeared in the doorway but did not step outside. For once, he looked like a man who understood his property line ended before my life began. Evan was nowhere visible. That told me enough. Claire took one step closer. "What happens now?" 6 months ago, that question would have sounded like a door opening. That night, it sounded like paperwork. I looked past her at the glowing house, at the windows full of faces pretending not to watch. 12 years of marriage does not disappear in one clean breath. It leaves behind dishes, photographs, old jokes, shared passwords, Christmas ornaments, and 1,000 tiny habits your body keeps reaching for after your mind has signed the exit. I felt that weight. I respected it. Then I put it down. "Now," I said, "we let the truth do what I was too tired to do for it." I walked to my truck. The gravel gave softly under my shoes. No one called me contractor boy. No one laughed. No one told me to know my lane. I opened the door, set my black folder on the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel. Through the windshield, I saw Claire standing under the gold porch light, Richard behind her, the whole Bellamy house glowing like a stage after the audience has learned the play was rigged. I started the engine. For the first time in months, the sound did not feel like escape. It felt like return. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, my patience for permission, and my signature for surrender. But the truth was simpler than that. I had not spent 6 months planning revenge. I had spent 6 months building a door. And that night, I finally walked through it.